Hi folks, how's it going? You're very welcome to a special exam focused revision video here of junior cycle history with ExamRevision.ie. So what we're going to do over this lesson, guys, is we're just going to look at the junior cycle history sample exam paper from a couple of years ago, and I'm going to go through the different types of questions that can be asked and how these questions are going to be marked. Okay. So, as you probably know, quite a lot of the questions on the junior cycle history paper are source-based questions. Okay, so you're given a source like this. This one, we've got a screenshot from the Irish Archives resource, and we have to answer some questions. Now, a lot of these source questions are really simple, really straightforward. Okay, so question one: what are archives according to this website? Like, that is as simple as it sounds. Okay, so you go up here, okay, and you find a sentence that describes what archives are. So here we have it: archives are the documents and records that relate to people, places, organizations, and events. You just copy that exact sentence, that exact line into your answer box, and you get your full marks. Okay, so that question would have been worth 3 marks. So just on the second page of that exam paper, guys, again, what is the web address of the Irish Archives resource? So again, if you go back to the previous source, okay, it's just www.iar.ie. Very straightforward, okay? And that, again, was worth 3 marks. I was going to bring your attention down to this question here, okay, D. What is the difference between an archive and a museum? Now, you're given 4 lines to answer here, okay? So if you're given kind of between 4 and 6 lines, it's safe to say that that question is probably worth 6 marks. All right. Now, last year's junior cycle paper and the sample one, which I'm using here, don't have the marks actually printed with the questions. Let's hope that your one in June will have the marks beside it. So, like, you know, if there's 6 marks, that means you got to make 2 developed relevant points here. Okay. So, you know, what an answer could look like here is, you know, an archive is a place where collections of historical documents are stored safely. It'd be great if you give an example, the Irish Archives. A museum is a place where artifacts from the past are stored. An example, the National Museum of Ireland. So that'd be a perfect 6-mark answer there. Okay, and that answer would fill up the box. So it's very important to try and fill up the box. If you're given 6 lines to answer and you're only writing 1 line, you're probably only going to get around 2 out of 6 marks. Okay, so you must make your statement, develop it, and then give an example. Very, very important. Okay, guys, on to our next question then. So here we have, again, very simple. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this. It's based around the source. Question 1, how do weather conditions contribute to the discovery of the logboat? Well, again, very simple here. You're just taking the direct quote from the sentence. Water levels had dropped after several weeks of dry weather, and the boat was lying in less than half a meter of water. That's all you got to say there. Like, there's no need for a big fancy kind of, you know, weather conditions contributed to the discovery of the logboat because water levels have dropped. You don't even need to say that. Just go straight forward. Water levels have dropped after several weeks of dry weather. Okay, that's all they want there. Name 2 organizations that send archaeologists to examine the logboat. So 2 organizations, well, we have the Underwater Archaeology Unit of the National Monument Service and the National Museum of Ireland. It's really as straightforward as that. So still on this question, guys, I'm going to just skip down to part E. Name and explain one method that archaeologists could use to date the logboat. So the key thing, guys, look at the wording, name and explain. So you'll get 2 between, depending on the marking scheme, 2 and 3 marks for naming your method of dating the logboat. And then there'll be possibly 3 marks going for describing how this works. Okay, so for example, what you could use carbon dating. Okay, so for saying carbon dating, you will get, we'll say, 3 marks. Okay, and then for explaining how it works, well, we could say how carbon dating works by measuring the amount of carbon lost, okay, in living things when they die. Okay, and this can help archaeologists to determine how old they are. Okay, so you know, you again must name and explain it. And guys, that kind of goes for a lot of things. Name and explain, name and explain. Very, very important. Okay. F, the logbook was an accidental discovery. What are two ways archaeologists identify sites for planned archaeological excavations? Again, guys, kind of use the name and explain template or format here. So, for example, archaeologists identify sites through geophysical surveys. So again, I've named my first one. Okay, now I need to explain it. So this is when they use metal detectors to find artifacts close to the Earth's surface. Okay, or close to the surface of the ground. Okay, so that's my first way. Again, it asks for two ways, so I must name and explain a second way. So a second way could be by examining aerial photographs. This can help us see crop marks, which indicate where old settlements used to be. Real straightforward. Okay, guys, question 3 on the exam, quite a long question here. Okay, so this is a question from Life and Death in Medieval Times. Now, this question, this style of question did not come up on the exam last year, but it absolutely may come up on the 2023 Junior Cycle History exam. So this is like, it's like a historical account question, and you're given 1.5 A4 pages to answer. So as I mentioned, guys, that means your answer should be in the region of 1.5 A4 pages. Okay, if you're only writing 3 or 4 lines, you're not going to get many marks here. So for this question, what I would say is to have at least 10 historical points on your civilization. So for example, they want you to write about life and death in medieval times. That's just the Middle Ages. Okay, and they want you to write about life and death in a setting. So you name your setting. Okay, you could say a medieval town, for example, life and death. So what were living conditions like in a medieval town? Well, it was quite cramped. Diseases spread quite easily. The roadways were very muddy and always clogged up with animals. Working life, so we had a lot of tradesmen. Okay, so for example, you had your blacksmiths, carpenters, etc. Leisure, all right, so they would have celebrated maypole, dancing, cockfighting, defending the settlement. So you could tie in there. Okay, a lot of medieval towns were centered around a manor house. They often had surrounding walls, palisades. They often had moats for protection. Religion, so religion was of great importance. Illness and death. So again, we mentioned illness. We could mention the Black Death there as well. So there's loads of things you could bring in here. But the key thing, guys, is in a question like this, make sure to be able to give 10 good points on it. Okay, 10 good, significant, relevant points. This question could come up easily on the Roman Empire. It could come up on the parliamentary tradition in Irish politics. It could come up on a life of a key reformer during the Reformation. So I'd be making sure that I can answer a long question on some of those topics. Just to show you guys, so this is the second part of it. So, you had half an A4 page plus your full A4 page. So this is what you're being expected to write, to nearly fill up 1.5 A4 pages. Question here on the plantations. So again, a nice enough question. I'm going to skip on to most of the initial questions here are related to this document. Okay. Now, just question C here. So, do you think the person who wrote this account was from an Irish background or an English background? Give reasons for your answer based on the document. So, a question like that, technically there's no wrong answer, but you must be able to back up your opinion. Okay. Now, usually what I will say is it's very obvious if it's from an Irish background or an English background. So it'll be easier to argue for one case over another. So for example, you could say they're from an English background easily enough here. Why could you say this? Well, you could say that they talk about the native Irish people as if they have just encountered them. They describe the native Irish as being civil, hospitable, and intelligent. They also talk about the plantation in a positive manner, saying it was a well-planted town of Protestant inhabitants and had very good pasture land. The writer also downplays bad points by stating that there are very few wolves, and this would maybe tell us that they were from an English, an English background, that they thought the plantation was a good thing. This one here, what changes occurred in Ireland as a result of the plantation which you studied? So this is an interesting one. Okay, so one of the key things in the learning outcome for the plantations is how did the plantations impact on identity and settlement in Ireland? Okay, so this is very, very important here. We must be able to explain the changes that occurred in Ireland because of the plantations, because as you can see, it has come up. This question would have been worth about 15 marks, okay? So you need to make at least five good quality points here. Name and explain 5 points to be guaranteed full marks. So what are these things? Well, we could say new religion was brought to Ireland, the Protestant religion. We could say there's new towns built in Ireland, such as Belfast, Omagh, and Enniskillen. These towns had straight, wide streets. They had defensive walls called bonds. We could say that there was a big change in culture in Ireland. For example, the Irish language was replaced by the English language. Irish law, the Brehon law, was replaced by English common law. We could say that there were lots of conflict. For example, the Cromwellian plantation, and then eventually the Troubles in the 1960s. There was new farming methods brought in. For example, a lot of livestock farming that the Irish would have done was replaced by modern crop farming. A big thing in Ulster then is a big change in land ownership. So a lot of the Irish Catholics, remember the old saying, the hell of the Connacht? Irish Catholics were expelled off their land. They were sent to the bad land in Connacht and the Bogside and Derry, and Protestant settlers were given their land. Okay, so I have an example of another question here, guys. I've just skipped on a bit of ahead in this exam paper. So this is from, there's a question related to the 1916 Rising. Okay, and interesting question here. H, why did the 1916 Rising end in military failure? You're given quite a fair chunk of answer space here. So this question will be worth about 18 marks. Okay, and to get full marks in this, again, you need to make at least 6 good quality, well-developed points where you can talk about, you know, the role of individuals, you know, significant places, you know, just good descriptions of things. Okay, so very important that we, when it comes to, for example, the key events in Irish history, kind of from 1911 to 1923, you should be able to write an account of the 1916 Rising, the Civil War, and the War of Independence. Okay, I would definitely be able to at least write a count of those 3 things. Okay, because any of those could be asked. All right. So a sample answer from this could be, you know, a number of reasons why the 1916 Rising ended in military failure. Firstly, only about 2,000 members took part in the Rising, meaning they would eventually be outnumbered by the British. The rebels also failed to control docks and railway stations, meaning the British could send reinforcements to Dublin. The British would eventually outnumber the rebels by about 20 to 1. The British had heavy weapons and artillery, such as the Helga gunboat, which they sailed up the Liffey. The rebel tactic, which was to occupy buildings such as the forecourts and the GPO, meant that, you know, they were very vulnerable to attack, and they could be attacked by artillery. Also, the Rising was mainly confined to Dublin. It didn't really take place throughout all of Ireland as it was originally intended, and this meant that the British could respond to it easily. Okay, so that's just an example of a sample answer for that question there, but we should prepare ourselves to be able to answer questions on the major events, your Civil War, the War of Independence, and 1916 Rising in that. Okay, just a bit of a thing to note, guys. The Civil War, it's the 100th anniversary of the ending of the Civil War, so it'll be very important that you guys know what are the impacts of the Civil War in Ireland. You know, death and destruction, the formation of 2 new political parties, kind of bitterness in Irish politics, etc. So make sure to know those things. They're very important. So guys, just another question here. This is related to the Cold War between the Soviet Union and the USA. So from your study of the Cold War, name an incident which involved the USA, the USSR, and at least one other country. Okay, so there's loads of things here. There could be the Berlin airlift, there could be the Vietnam War, there could be the Korean War, the Cuban Missile Crisis, etc., etc. So you get 3 marks for naming your incident. And again, guys, look, you're provided with quite a bit of answer space here. This question, again, probably worth 18 marks. So you got to, again, be able to give at least 6 well-developed points here with this question, okay? So I would definitely be able to be, so I mentioned that you should be able to write an account from, each of the events in 1916. I'd say you should be able to write an account maybe from 2 of the events in the Cold War, okay, just to be on the safe side. And that same goes for the Second World War. If you go back to the Second World War, make sure you can write an account about this size on, say, Operation Barbarossa or the Battle of Britain, okay. I would definitely make sure I can answer. I can answer questions on those. So guys, again, skipping on ahead, another question here that's most likely worth 18 marks. This one is related to patterns of change. So you got to be able to know your pattern of change. So for anyone who has been partaking in my course, our pattern of change is health and medicine, and there actually is a Saturday session video related to health and medicine on the ExamRevision YouTube channel. So explain 3 changes or developments that took place in relation to the theme you studied. So firstly, by just saying health and medicine, you will get 3 marks. Now, explain 3 changes or developments that took place. So if you can name and explain 3 different developments, okay, you are going to be getting your 18 marks here. Okay, so again, health and medicine. So, many developments took place in health and medicine, particularly in the Renaissance and 20th century. In medieval times, treatments often relied on superstition and religion and were very ineffective. However, during the Renaissance, doctors such as Andreas Vesalius dissected bodies to get a better understanding of anatomy. Vesalius published his findings on the fabric of the human body. Other guys such as William Harvey discovered blood circulated around the body, and his findings were published in a book called On the Motion of the Heart and Blood in Animals. In 1928, Alexander Fleming discovered penicillin. This was an antibiotic that worked by killing bacteria before they could spread. Saved a lot of lives. Other treatments developed in the 20th century were chemotherapy, and this meant that basically, people now could be treated for cancer. Okay, so I've actually named 4 changes that took place in the theme I've studied. Okay, so again, name and explain 3 changes that take place in your chosen theme. Last one here is on the Troubles in Northern Ireland. The tricky question here. What were 3 key differences between Unionists and Nationalists during the time of the Troubles in Northern Ireland? Again, guys, you're given quite a bit of space. Question could be worth maybe 18, maybe more, maybe 24 marks, okay? So you need to be able to identify 3 key differences at least, okay? So 3 key differences, name them and explain them. Well, the first thing we could say is Unionists wanted to remain in the United Kingdom. They wanted Northern Ireland to remain in the United Kingdom. Nationalists wanted Ireland to be reunified as a 32-county republic. Unionists would be mainly Protestant or Presbyterian. Nationalists would be mainly Catholic. Unionists would have played different sports such as rugby and cricket. Nationalists would most likely play games like GAA, like Gaelic football and hurling. We could say that Unionists had, I suppose, much better access at this time during the Troubles, much better access to housing and voting rights, whereas Nationalists didn't. A nationalist would campaign through the Northern Ireland civil rights movement for better rights in those areas. Okay, so again, guys, the key thing is answer space, answer space, answer space. You're given quite a bit of answer space, so you should be quite close to filling it up. Final thing, guys, actually is Ireland joined the EEC in 1973, okay, which is 50 years ago this year. So I would definitely be preparing myself to know how has Ireland benefited from European Union membership. There's a strong chance that question might come up, okay? So how has Ireland benefited from EU membership, guys? again, just because it's the 50th anniversary, there's a strong chance that that may come up. Okay, folks, thanks for tuning in. I hope this was beneficial, and the very best of luck in your exams.